Hi guys, my name is Nonima Dikela. Welcome to my YouTube channel. So today, I want us to talk about the Senzo Meyiwa trial and what happened in court. Today, the court heard a testimony that may redefine this entire trial. Not speculation, not arguments, but allegations so serious that, if proven, they strike at the heart of the justice itself. This is the matter of trial of Senzo Meyiwa, and today the spotlight has turned sharply to Bongani Ndanzi, accused number 2. What he told the court was chilling, and what it could mean for this case is seriously dangerous for the state case, because the things that he's describing are very scary. The things that he's describing that happened to him are very inhuman. That is not how a human being is supposed to be treated. The trial has dragged for years. We already know this. South Africans knows every name, every delay, every heated exchange in that courtroom. But today was different because instead of arguing timelines or phone records, the court was asked to confront one question. Was a confession coerced or forced out of Bongani Ndanzi? Well, if the answer is yes, then the consequences are devastating for the state case. So we are talking about the night. Ndanzi told the court his ordeal began on the night of the 18th of June 2020, continuing into the early hours of June 2020. He alleges that while he was in police custody, he was subjected to treatment that went far beyond lawful questioning. Hands restrained, movement restricted, and according to him, pain deliberately inflicted. These are not minor claims. These are allegations of torture. He also described that there was a device that was used on him, which I think it was a teaser. He said it was a dark, roundly 20 centimeters long, similar in the size of a ruler. That's what Ramsipule was trying to explain so that we understand. And then he says it was a torch. Hence, I say perhaps it was a teaser. He testified that after as this teaser was used on him, I guess maybe he fainted. I don't know. Maybe he doesn't know that he fainted, but something happened to him. I'm sure. I want to believe. Okay, let me not say I'm sure. I want to believe that he fainted. That's why they poured him with water. Mabena is the one that poured him with water. And also he was tortured via a plastic covering that was put above his head and then onto his face, nostrils and everything. Now he couldn't breathe. And then he also testified that water was poured on him and a plastic covering was removed from his head. This device was used on his body. He struggled to find words, not because he was exaggerating, but because he was trying to describe the pain that was overwhelming. He said it felt like something inside his body so intense that it could not stand. He could not stand upright. And the court heard also how he says he was restrained. Ndanzi also testified that his hands were cuffed to a staircase railing at shoulder level, both arms fixed, no freedom to move. He told the court that if he tried to shift or resist, officers restrained him further. According to him, he was helpless. Guys, the police, guys, the police. He went on to say that after the device was used, he experienced severe pain and began bleeding from his nose. This, he said, explained why he never received his t-shirt back. Apparently, they took his t-shirt that he bleeded on when those things were happening. Again, these are allegations, but they are allegations with serious legal weight. And as Ndanzi was busy testifying, the tensions in the courtroom escalated. Let me do a different video for that, because that, my lord, I enjoyed. I do not want to lie. I enjoyed it. I don't care who says what. Anyway, also Undanzi, what I like about him is that his testimony is consistent with what he said during the trial within a trial. So for now, there is nothing that you can say you are finding and it's different from what he said before. Whatever that he is saying now, it's exactly, and then he's adding at least perhaps 5%, 10% of other things, which he could not say during the time of the trial within a trial. But right now, what we are seeing, what we are hearing is Ndanzi explaining or relieving his pain, his trauma, and he did get emotional at some point, and it was painful to listen to because we can't really see him. But one thing that I am sure that the law is clear about is that South African law is unambiguous. A confession must be free, voluntarily, made without force, threats, or coercion. If a court finds a statement was obtained through assault or intimidation, it must be excluded. No exceptions, no shortcuts, no balancing acts. If a confession is ruled inadmissible, the state cannot rely on it, no matter how important it is to their case. So that is what is at stake for the state case when it comes to the Senzo Meyiwa matter. So here is the real question now. If Ndanzi's confession falls away, what remains? The state would need to stand on independent forensic evidence. Do they have that? Do they? Because we do have forensic evidence from a different, an independent forensic person. We also witness credibility. Do they have credible witnesses? Which I doubt, because all their witnesses were, a lot was happening with them. Also, phone records. Well, they can't really rely on phone records because those phone records that they say are supposedly the ones that are showing movement of accused number 3 and are showing movements of accused number 2, they are both very questionable pertaining to what needs to be said in that courtroom. To what, no, not what needs to be said, what needs to align with the narrative of the state case. Because accused number 3's phone shows that, yes, at some point he was in Vosloorus, he moved to Katlehong, moved to Kupi Kupi, and ended up in Joburg around after 5 o'clock. By 7 o'clock, he was in Johannesburg. Like by past 5, 7 o'clock, he was in Johannesburg. So there is no way that he was at George Koch. In fact, after 5 o'clock, he was at George Koch. So there is no way where you can actually say that he is the one that entered the Khumalo home. It can't, it won't make sense because his phone says up until 8:30, he was at his place at George Koch where he was staying. So there is no way that they can say now the cell phone evidence is going to assist, the cell phone evidence is going to help in anything. It can't help. It can't. It can't be calculated as something that is going to help the state case. It can't. Now we are left with one thing and one thing only. What is the state going to do? Also, the ballistic evidence is also very questionable because the ballistic person, Mangena, came with his own thing, and then Mube got his own ballistic person who says, no, the gun is not Ndondoning, is not. Yeah, so there's a lot of things. Also, corroboration untainted by coercion. We do not have that. We currently do not have that. So again, that is something that the state is also lacking very much on. So now it leaves one thing only, Ndanzi's evidence. If Judge Ratta decides, I am not going to put the I'm not going to put I'm going to they are not admissible. He gives a verdict and says, now, previously I gave a ruling because I wanted to hear these confessions. After listening to the confessions and the arguments and everything, now these confessions are not going to help at all, especially because the state could not prove beyond reasonable doubt that the accused were not tortured, and the accused ABCD aligns with them saying that they were tortured. The AVL says aligns a lot with what Bongani Ntanzi says. Do you understand? So there's a lot of things that Judge Rata will need to deal with. And if those stand strong, the case survives. The state case survives if it will only survive if they had independent forensic evidence, which they don't. They had witness credibility, they don't. If they had phone records, they don't, that are going to assist, they don't. If they had ballistics that were going to assist, they don't. If they had corroboration untainted by coercion, they don't. So their case can survive. If they lean heavily on a disputed confession, the foundation is cracking, Gesana, because right now, all of that is not making sense. This is not about me. This is not about me showing sympathy. It is about procedure, legality, and constitutional rights. Bongani Ntanzi, the way he is detailing the story and the way he detailed it during a trial within a trial is still the same. It is still the same. These, let's be clear about one thing. These are allegations. They are being tested. They have not yet been proven. But courts do not ignore allegations of torture. Normal courts, of course, they confront them head on. Because when justice is compromised at the beginning, everything that follows is poisoned. So the question is Judge Rata going to allow justice to be poisoned in his hands? So today's testimony did not decide guilt or innocence, but it may decide whether the state case can legally stand. South Africans are watching. The courtroom is listening. And these consequences of his testimony may echo far beyond this trial. Now we are going to see where that takes us. What are your thoughts when it comes to Ntanzi's testimony regarding the confession, the torture, and everything? Let's talk in the comment section. I want to hear your views. Thank you so much. I'll see you on our next video. Bye-bye.